Is the mayor speaking now? Because if she is, a few of us can't hear her.
I am speaking now.
There
Welcome
we
to
go.
our special meeting of Municipal Council on Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask if there's any declaration of interest at this time. Not seeing any, we will move to item C, and that's deputations, and at this time we have no deputations. And I would like to move down to our land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the first peoples of the Williams Treaties, First Nations, and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community, and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of this land, and we join them in this responsibility. At this point now, we will move down to our workshop, and I will turn it over to our CAO, Mr. Webster, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to yourself, members of council, and others that have been able to join us tonight. This is one of our special council education workshops. We try to position some of our more interesting topics for broader public engagement and discussion for the evening sessions. And tonight we are doing our annual growth management update for council. And we've been doing this for the last, I'd say 3-4 years. And tonight we are taking a different tact, as I outlined just at our last council meeting. Generally up to this point, we've been doing sort of broader program and service delivery reviews by department. And this year we tried to focus a little more and be a little more tactical in our approach. And so if I could, maybe we could get the slideshow started. I'm not sure if the Mr. Clerk could put that on the screen this evening. And if we could proceed to the first slide, just the objectives of the workshop. And essentially what we want to do tonight is review where we've been. We want to talk a little bit about where we are currently, what our current status is, and we want to talk about the next steps and some of the challenges and some of the more innovative approaches that we're bringing tonight for council's discussion and deliberation. So we hope that this workshop will be well received. There's going to be a series of different speakers. It's not one speaker to 5 slides. It's going to be very iterative. So I would encourage council at any point after a slide or a speaker, if there's questions or comments, Madam Mayor, through you, maybe approach and be able to handle and manage those matters as we move forward. Next slide, please. To anchor our context for this term of council, I'll remind council it wasn't too long ago in 2018 of the last election. Time does fly. We are in an election year, and council recall very early in the term of this 4-year term in 2019, council did approve a strategic plan, and there was 4 main priority areas. And responsible growth and environmental protection was clearly one of them. And it's also was noted that to build and have complete communities and have our quality programs and services were all key initiatives as well. And then to have our culture of municipal excellence help deliver on all those other 3 areas. And clearly for our municipality, one of the things that differentiates us is we are a designated primary growth area by the province of Ontario, and growth is a vital component of our strategic plan. Next slide, please. Just recently, and this was coincidental that it happens to be very, very close in timing to this workshop. Given the last census data and the time to accumulate it, East Gwillimbury was noted as the fastest growing municipality in Canada. And it's something we're proud of. I think we've managed the growth. We've introduced a lot of new families and residents to our community. And as well, we've had some impressive employment growth, and we certainly want to continue that in the future. So tonight you're going to hear from, as I said, a series of speakers on many different aspects of the growth. And that concludes my opening comments, Madam Mayor. I will be available to answer questions throughout this session, and or as well as provide some closing comments at the end. So on that note, I'll pass it over to our next speaker, and I believe it's Adam Robb, who's our Manager of Planning and Development Services.
Thank you, Tom. Next slide, please. So again, highlighting our title as Canada's fastest growing municipality, these two charts just show quickly our building permits issued since 2016, where generally speaking, we're seeing over 1,000 permits issued each year. And then corresponding on the right is our population growth from 2016, where we're seeing a steady rise, thus giving us the title of Canada's fastest growing municipality. Next slide, please. This slide speaks to the York Region population and employment growth forecast for the town to 2051 that is being pursued as part of the regional MCR process. These growth numbers stem from the provincial growth plan as minimums that can be exceeded. And on the left is our population breakdown, and on the right is our employment breakdown over each decade to 2051. As noted at the bottom, the town is forecasted by the region to grow by over 91,000 people and over 33,500 jobs to 2051. The vast majority of this growth will be within the town's central growth area, and the employment numbers are also expected to increase when we account for the full and ultimate build-out of the town's Bradford bypass corridor, which is currently designated as White Belt. Next slide, please. In terms of proactively planning for and managing our future growth, this map here shows the regional approved urban area expansion for the town, where 700 hectares of new urban area was approved to accommodate our growth forecast to 2051. The map on the left is our previous urban boundary, as is in the current regional official plan and current town official plan. And on the right is the approved urban boundary approved by Regional Council in late 2021. As mentioned, is a key priority of the town's updated official plan to manage the phasing and our pace of growth for these new community areas to ensure the development of complete, balanced, and sustainable communities. As also mentioned, the future build out of the remaining White Belt lands, specifically where we have the remaining 30% White Belt to the north for the Bradford bypass corridor, will help us to continue to promote our employment growth and balanced growth overall. With that, I'll now turn it over to our next speaker. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Adam. And through you, Madam Mayor, for any members of the public that are listening in or watching, my name is Margot Beja. I'm the Director of Economic Development. And I'm just going to touch on a few sort of concepts and key considerations that I think are important to look into as we continue to grow and prepare for the change that growth brings. In terms of the economic development objectives around job growth, we recognize that there are a number of contributing factors. Certainly our ability to be business friendly and support active investment, securing the servicing of employment lands so that those projects can be built and move forward. Assuring that we have a diverse and affordable or attainable housing stock to meet the workforce needs of this job growth, and then the actual strategies that we deploy to attract the workforce and the talent and to keep a steady pipeline of talent coming in to be able to sustain our economy. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in the next slide, please. So again, this is really in the context of a workshop and some food for thought, really just wanted to bring forward some concepts that Council may wish to consider or perhaps dive into in more detail as we continue on this growth journey. Certainly, in terms of our enhanced business friendliness and supports our efforts around our Business Advantage program and providing concierge service to to businesses and investors that are going through the development process. We continue to build on that through process enhancements and through, and can continue to expand on that through training and capacity building within the organization, so that we're all really focused on customer service and differentiating East Gwillimbury as a business-friendly location of choice for prospective investors. Something that's new that has happened with the launch of the most recent economic development strategy is a more targeted focus on entrepreneurship development. And as Council is aware, we have a really productive partnership with our neighbors in Georgina and York University through their Y-Space programming. And that will also contribute to job growth through the creation of new enterprises and scaling up of existing or emerging entrepreneurs. And then sort of the third piece of that puzzle is the targeted investment attraction, being able to communicate our value proposition to expanding firms that may, may consider East Gwillimbury as a location for their expansion or their further development. And then in terms of the servicing of employment lands, we recognize that that is or can be a barrier to future growth. So, perhaps there are roles that we can take on in terms of advocacy to ensure that, while we have been designated as a growth municipality, that that we have the tools to be able to support and affect that growth. We're also looking into, and my colleagues in, CIS will go into this in a little bit more detail, but innovative options for self-servicing. So we're not prepared to wait around until a servicing solution is available. We want to make sure that we can support growth and support innovative investment in the interim. And so looking at what we can do that some of the presentations that Council has seen recently around some self-servicing systems that can be sustainable in the long term. And then ensuring that as part of that journey towards having servicing for both business and residential growth, that we are, working closely with our provincial partners to ensure that they are supporting our needs in terms of key infrastructure. So it's sort of taking a step back from what we tend to do sort of at the customer interface, and thinking a little bit more broadly about, are there opportunities to impact policy through advocacy or to impact the timelines of some of these servicing developments. Next slide, please. When we talk about diverse or affordable or perhaps more aptly attainable housing stock, I think part of our preparations for growth and being able to support sustainable growth is making sure that we're creating enough housing supply for the workforce that we plan to attract. Adam spoke to the job creation numbers. Well, we need to think about where they're going to live and what will make sense based on the fact that not everybody that comes to our community is necessarily going to be looking for single family dwellings. So having a diverse mix that fits people at different income levels and different stages of their career. And there are a couple of concepts that we can look into that we've seen other municipalities embrace, such as the concept of workforce housing that might inform future planning, whereby you assess what the median income is and make sure that your housing stock is aligning with where that median income sits, or looking at is there a role for inclusionary zoning where you have policy tools that ensure that developments above a certain threshold are including a percentage of units that would be termed either affordable or attainable based on what our goals are. And then sort of the next sort of consideration as we move forward is thinking about what are the current and future skill needs of our existing employers and the employers that will be moving into our community, and where will that talent be recruited from. And as part of addressing that, we are looking to establish partnerships such as the one with York University and other education partners to ensure that we can not only attract businesses, but we can assure them that they'll have a talent pipeline over the long term. And because that is increasingly going to be one of the big differentiating factors in being able to attract new investment as we see, sort of the war for talent increasing not only across North America, but across the globe. And then sort of as a subset of that, thinking about if we want to attract people, how are we also going to keep them, ensure that they stay and engage and become valued and participating members of the community, whether it's looking at education, the housing, as we've mentioned, or sort of lifestyle and amenities, transit, all of the things that sort of support somebody's ability to not only work here, but to live and participate as a member of the community. So I just put that forward as sort of food for thought. Happy to answer any questions or discuss or, look into any of these concepts further. But I think that these are some important considerations as we move forward to achieving our economic development aims. I'll now turn it over to Adam or Lawrence again to speak to the next slides. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Margot. Next slide again, please. So just again, as an overview to the land use planning system that we have in Ontario, our planning context, it all stems from the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, and then provincial plans, including the growth plan, which is shown here. As a lower tier municipality, our local official plan also needs to conform to the regional official plan, and then it provides the guidance for other local planning tools as listed on the left, which include zoning bylaw, updates, minor variances, site plans, and the division of land. Next slide, please. You've kind of touched on this already, but under the growth plan, we are recognized as a destination for growth. East Gwillimbury, we have significant provincial infrastructure investments that have been made here and are planned for the town, namely the Highway 404 North extension and then the future Bradford bypass. And it's important to recognize that being a destination for growth really is all about making sure that we develop as a complete and balanced community moving forward under these obligations from the province. Next slide, please. So for the town's ongoing official plan review, we are setting the vision for long-term growth in line with provincial legislation to the required planning horizon of 2051. Key features of our updated official plan, as we'll be going through the iterative public consultation process as well, includes the new urban area expansion, the delineation of a secondary plan and community design plans for these new urban areas to proactively manage their phasing and growth, planning to ensure that 83% green space is protected at our full build-out capacity and that we make sure to develop as complete and balanced communities, and also aligning our planning with infrastructure investments such as the Bradford bypass. Next slide, please. And again, we've shown this map and this breakdown before, but again, just really reiterates the fact that even at full build out of the town, we will be remaining over 83% protected green space. This is broken down based on over 75% of the town being protected under the Greenbelt and Oak Ridges Moraine legislation, and then another 8% of the town's total land area being protected as part of our local natural heritage system within the central growth area, which is shown on the map as outlined in red. The town is committed to sustainable growth and the protection of these lands over the long term. Next slide, please, and I believe I'll turn it over to the next speaker now.
Thanks, Adam. For those of you watching, Mark Valchich, Deputy CAO, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the master plans that support the OP process. So Adam talked a little bit about the planning sort of framework in Ontario, and at the highest level within the town, our OP really sort of lays out how we're going to use the land in the town over the long term, so over a 30-year horizon. Supporting that OP is a number of what we call master plans, and these master plans dive into different areas of a little bit more specialty expertise on road design, road construction, economic development and job creation, which Margot talked about a little bit earlier. Very importantly, supply of water and treatment of wastewater, stormwater. There's a whole variety of master plans. Now, these master plans have varying timelines, but they're all generally long-term in nature. So anywhere from 10 plus years looking forward. Next slide, please. So in addition to the master plans on the previous slide, there's a number of other master planning areas that we have. Library, our emergency services, fire, active transportation, trails, and development charges. And the development charges, we haven't typically in the past referred to it as a master plan, but really it is the growth-related financial master plan. And this one's really important because this one really indicates not only sort of lines up with timing or estimated timing for growth-related infrastructure, but more importantly, how are we going to collect the money to pay for that as development proceeds? And one of the things that we have done in the town, which is a little different than many other municipalities around the province, is we've insourced that development charge exercise. We've brought in expertise that we have now in-house rather than sort of bringing in consultants every 3 or 4 or 5 years to do our DC updates. And so in addition to insourcing that, which has really served us well administratively and supporting council and in fact working effectively with the development industry, we've also accelerated it sometimes the frequency with which we can update that. So we're much more nimble now in terms of being able to update that as we go. And you'll recall, council, that recently, for example, we did a very targeted update that looked at our health and active living plaza and our recreational financial needs coming up in the near future. And it's really important that we make sure that those costings are up to date so that as permits are being pulled, we're collecting the right amount of money to make sure that that capital construction can be paid for. We also, on this, just before I leave this slide, I just wanted to mention one of the things that we have done to support this iteration of OP and master planning is we have created a coordination team. So there's a team of staff representing all of the areas of master plans. And that group meets a couple of times a month or less or more depending on activity levels, but really to make sure that all of the information, key information around population targets and any assumptions is being shared so that we make sure that we're in line and that we're making sure that those master plans are being developed with complete and full information and support and knowledge of the balance of the team that's working on the other supporting plans. Next slide, please. At this point, I'm going to turn it back, I believe, to Adam.
Actually, I'll be speaking on the supply and demand portion of this. And hello, Mayor and members of council and those that are watching. And my name is Lawrence Cook, the Acting General Manager of Development Services. And so this next portion of the presentation, staff would just like to provide council with a better understanding of what and who the demands are. And if overall, we really have 4 groups of people demanding for servicing in town. Got people that are new applicants, approved application, consent applications, individual owned homeowners who wants to connect to municipal servicing. Those are the 4 main groups of people. If you can go to the next slide, please. And just to provide some statistics is that in 2021 to 2022, we already had about over 1,000 units of pre-consultations with people that are interested and basically asking if they can build in East Gwillimbury. And a company that is a numerous numbers of non-residential requests as well that's coming through the town. So we certainly have been busy consulting with people even within our existing boundaries. And so what Adam was talking about earlier about the urban expansion. So these numbers don't even include those areas. Next slide. And this slide here shows some of the active applications that we currently have. And there are over 4,000 units worth of residential related application that's currently in the process of being reviewed and awaiting for servicing allocation to move forward. And you can see that stretches, there's applications in Mount Albert, Sharon, and as well as the Yonge and Green Lane area. People are very much interested in coming to the town of East Gwillimbury. And also this includes non-residential, and not indicated on the slide, but we have at least over 10 applications waiting to be prioritized for non-residential development. And they're all equally as important and job creation wise interest of the town. And also not shown on this is there are about probably 4,000 units that are in draft approval mode that can't finish their subdivisions. This stretches across all three communities, the Sharon, Holland Landing, and Queensville, and which are all part of the YDSS, which I'll speak to later. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'd like to pass on to the next speaker.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. Can I go to the next slide, please? Often when we think of growth and we think of what it means for a municipality or a town or a city to grow, we just think of the housing and the people. But there's so much more that comes along with growth. And so we just wanted to recap some of the things that that we're going to see as we move forward with growth in East Gwillimbury. Clearly, one of the things that's big on our radar right now is over the next few years, looking forward to exciting new recreational facilities and programs, most notably our Health and Active Living Plaza. And we're going to hear about that in a little bit more in a few slides. The ability as we grow out to have a robust trail system that has great connectivity and ability to get throughout the town and actually beyond the municipal boundary on the trail systems as it connects, you know, on a more macro level. Parks, as we know, we've had an incredible number of park openings. In fact, you know, this year we've got over a dozen park openings, official park openings planned to celebrate the numerous wonderful parks that are coming into the community. And as we grow, and Tom, our CAO, talked earlier about over the last 5 years, we've seen the growth. We're going to see more diversity, a richer mix of culture in our town, and that's going to be something that we can embrace and celebrate as we move forward. Often when you think of growth, we talk about the concept of planning in a way that allows us to live, work, play, and learn in the community. And so job creation and education, healthcare expansion, these are all things that are important elements to what we refer to as the complete community. Next slide, please. So growth, we certainly don't just wait for growth to show up on our doorstep and then try and figure it out. In fact, some of the positioning and planning for growth, in addition to the planning documents, the OPs and the master plans that have long-term views, there's also sort of policies, practices, standards, and so on that we put in place as we go, as we prepare for not only the planning, but the managing of the growth as it happens. On the financial side, certainly over the last, decade plus, back in about 2011, 2012 timeframe, we finished paying off debt for the town. That debt was related to the original construction of the Civic Center facility, as well as our original completion of the sports complex. And since that time, the town has managed to stay debt-free. So in a very healthy financial place, we've got growing reserves, and we introduced what we refer to as multi-year funding plans. And this was a really important aspect, financial aspect as it related to growth, because not only is it dealing with our ability to gradually put aside money to increase service levels for things like emergency services, but also it's allowed us to carve out gradually money from assessment growth as we're growing to ultimately pay for operating new facilities like our Health and Active Living Plaza. And so that's very important, because then when you get to the points in time where you're building it, and we know that we build it with the capital reserves that come from development charges, at that time, you need to be prepared to operate it. And that's where the multi-year funding plans are assisting us to carve that operating money out as we grow, so that at that time, we're ready to do that without major spikes in taxes for residents. We've certainly looked and applied leading edge building standards as we've grown. I talked a little bit about the diversity that's going to be, coming, and that is already coming into our community, is going to continue as we grow. I think importantly, we've developed the equity, diversity, and inclusion framework, and our director, Ms. Gandhi, has done a great job in sort of starting to position us to be prepared to embrace that diversity in our community and celebrate it. In terms of how we operate, as we grow, it's really important that sometimes I refer to it as, working smarter, not harder, because we've got increased amount of volume and activity as we grow. And so modernization is really important. And certainly we know that the last couple of years with responding to the pandemic has really put our modernization program into overdrive. But it's about not only how we operate and work, so making tools available to our staff, information available to our staff so they can work more efficiently, more effectively, but it's also how do we deliver our programs and services to residents, and how do we engage with them in a way that works for them. So we're trying to offer accessible services and services in a way that, whether it be virtual, in person, or what have you, that makes it easy and accessible for residents to access the things that they need from the town. Next slide, please. I've talked a little bit about program and services. One of the things that we do notice, and certainly I recall this, if you will, from my time working in another organization in Simcoe County, was we used to talk about, sort of as we were growing, we had people coming into the community with what we call GTA expectations, but we weren't operating with GTA budgets. And so it was really important that we sort of prepared for that, managed expectations as we grew, and that to the point I made earlier, that we made sure that we were in a good fiscal position so that we could make sure that we could, in fact, deliver and try and meet expectations of our changing community. One of the things that we have done is that we've really focused on the people side of our organization. So we've got a mantra that's been that we've been sort of looking to recruit people that have what we call been where we're going. And so I can tell you that probably since shortly after the arrival of the CAO in the 2005 range, it's been a medium and long-standing journey to rebuild that team of people, the leadership team, and also the operational components and frontline services in our organization. And I think we're well positioned, as we move forward, to continue to plan for and manage the incredible growth that's still ahead of us. The Health and Active Living Plaza and Sports Complex redesign, I'm going to turn it over at this point to GM Aaron Karmazin, just to talk a little bit more about that with the next slide, please.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, Mayor Haxon, members of the council, any members of the public, residents and businesses that might be viewing the workshop this evening. My name's Aaron Karmazin. I'm the General Manager for Community Parks, Recreation and Culture with the town of East Gwillimbury. Tonight I'll be providing a brief update on the Health and Active Living Plaza project, largest project in town history. Pleased to report the site plan is now complete and the facility design is now approaching approximately 95% complete. We pre-qualified all of our general contractors, all qualified and capable general contractors to procure the construction for the project. The site plan application has been submitted and we are in the consultation period for the site plan application, and the building branch submission is being prepared within the week. We are working diligently with all authorities having jurisdiction, including the town planning and building branches, the region of York, and the LSRCA, and working through all of the terms and conditions and requirements for our site plan approval. We are also working very closely with our engineering staff through CIES, as well as the region of York, given some of the servicing constraints that have been identified, in particular with ICI, industrial, commercial, institutional capacity. And we're working diligently to ensure the Health and Active Living Plaza has the appropriate capacity in place at time of construction and prior to. We do have a planned tender for early Q2 of 2022, and we are working with communication staff on a very comprehensive communication plan and strategy that will not only keep our residents and businesses in town informed, but also get them very excited about the project. You can see an icon that has been developed by our communication staff, incorporating the corporate, some of the corporate colors, as well as highlighting the building footprint of the Health and Active Living Plaza with vibrant colors. I'll now pass on the presentation to Development Services, care of Adam Robb and Lawrence Cook.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. And so you heard about the town's residential and employment targets and how important development is here to help support different areas of town, the new programs and services that was just highlighted by both Mark and Aaron. But what does our supply really look like, and how much capacity do we really have moving forward? Next slide, please. So the York-Durham sewage solution has reached its full capacity, and this is what we call the YDSS. And this YDSS, that some of us would remember, it dates back to 2012, where we originally got approximately about 7,000 single detached units worth of allocation. To date, I can report that we used up more than around 74% of that. And hence on the little diagram that kind of gives you that plus minus 1,800 is how much we've already assigned to some of the developers in Sharon, Holland Landing, and Queensville. These remaining 1,800 is spread across the different developers in those communities, but not really enough to really complete any phases. So they've been standstill for quite a bit of time. And even though that's quite a bit of a large number to say that, 1,800 is a large number, but really 50% of that number belongs to or tied to and agreed to basically one major developer in Queensville, which remains some of the other areas of town, Sharon and Holland Landing, with really not much left. The town's reserve, as you've heard, it's about 1,000 single detached equivalent, and they're pending on servicing upgrades. And I guess our engineering staff later in the presentation will speak on about the non-residential flow rates. That's also in restrictions. Next slide, please. So, I'd like to spend a little bit moment to break down that last 1,000 unit that's unallocated. So these are the ones that has not been tied to any development. As I spoke earlier, there's 4 groups of people that's really asking for allocation. The people that are coming in with new applications is one of the major groups. So out of that 1,000, how does it all add up? So the original from 2012 for the YDSS, we're left with about 136 single detached home equivalents. And then we've got this newly completed pumping station in the town of Aurora that will give us about 761. And then the next few items there, a couple items, the Henderson sewage pumping station, that will give us 56, but that's not due to complete until 2023. So technically we don't have that. And then as well as the 111 single detached units, it's in the centers and corridors that are provided by the region. So, and that's also only be available around 2023. So meaning that 111 units, you can't use that everywhere in town or anywhere in town. They're restricted to the centers and corridors. And even still today, there's a Sharon inline solution that the Sharon Landowners Group has undertake to help infrastructure their remaining developments in Sharon. But to date, they still would like to ask council for additional about 30 single detached equivalent to help them finish it to complete their approved subdivisions in town. So I hope that helps give you a snapshot of some of our current supply here. Next slide, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker here.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm Mike Molinari. I'm the General Manager of Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services. And I'll just walk through the next couple slides with regards to the presentation. So the UISS is the proposed sanitary servicing scheme, which will allow the town to achieve its long-term growth. The region has advised that the earliest the UISS could be in place is by 2029, and that's if the EA were approved now. So that leaves about a 7-year gap from today until the solution is in place as a best case scenario. Without a solution in place such as the UISS, both residential and non-residential development will halt. So the table outlines a high-level timeline for the work that's been completed over the past more than 20 years to identify a servicing solution. So back in the early 2000s, the initial proposed solution was to actually send the sanitary flows down to Lake Ontario via Duffins Creek, similar to the YDSS. In about 2004, the minister intervened and directed a northern Lake Simcoe solution, which essentially was meant to keep the water within the Lake Simcoe watershed. So that had a significant impact on the overall project. And essentially the EA for the UISS was completed and by 2014 and placed on the minister's desk at that time. So as of today, there's been subsequent consultation with First Nations, and an expert panel has been assembled to review the project and provide recommendations to the minister. Next slide, please. So there are a number of servicing systems and schemes currently available across the town. So firstly, there's the Mount Albert Water Resource Recovery Facility, which provides sewage treatment for Mount Albert. That facility is actually at capacity, and area developers are currently looking to expand the plant and provide an additional 2,000 persons of capacity, which will actually facilitate the build out of Mount Albert, the Mount Albert community. There are also private systems, including septic systems and potentially future on-site private treatment plants to provide servicing. In addition, there is the YDSS, which services Sharon, Queensville in conjunction with the Holland Landing Lagoons. In addition, there's servicing along Harry Walker into Newmarket, which takes flows from area businesses, as well as a portion of the Highway 404 employment lands. And lastly, we have the SDIP program that was designed to provide additional servicing capacity subject to incorporating a number of higher standards and environmental features. And Kevin Brake, our Manager of Development, will walk you through the program on the next slide.
Thank you, Mike. As noted, I'm Kevin Brake, Manager of Development. With respect to the Sustainable Development Incentive Program, as noted, it was developed in 2014 to realize additional interim residential servicing capacity and bridge the gap to the Upper York, which at the time was anticipated by 2018. The program was established and developed by the town in conjunction with the region and development industry, and sought to establish a guideline for development that promoted reduced water demands, resulting in reduced wastewater demand, as well as developments that are more energy efficient. The program enabled the region to increase available residential allocation by approximately 28%, or 1,535 units, and establish guidelines for available non-residential servicing capacity. As noted back in 2014, when this program was developed, the Upper York sewage solution was never envisioned to be delayed beyond 2018. Next slide, please. To address servicing supply constraints, efforts have been put into infrastructuring, as previously noted, and or expanding capacity of existing systems. These efforts to date include upgrades to existing regional infrastructure, including upgrades to the Aurora sanitary pumping station, as well as twinning of regional trunk sewers to relieve bottlenecks and increase capacity in the system. With respect to water-tight pipes, enhanced development standards that promote water-tight pipes that prevent groundwater infiltration and retain capacity within the pipe system for sewage flows are being implemented. And also, we're working with the Sharon Landowners Group with the development of an inline storage solution, which will utilize the existing Sharon trunk sewer to control flows for the region system, which will create additional capacity. We're also exploring implementation of on-site controls for future site plans to mitigate peak flows, such as control manholes or storage tanks that would moderate discharge rates from these sites to the sewer system to minimize downstream impacts of these peak flows. This will potentially allow for additional servicing capacity in the future. As noted, while these measures are effective in the short term to address the servicing shortfall, they will not solve the servicing shortfall. Next slide, please. So with respect to impacts of the servicing challenge, without additional servicing allocation to facilitate growth, meeting provincial targets for both residential and non-residential will be very challenging. Although non-residential growth in East Gwillimbury and associated servicing capacity guidelines have been sustainable since 2014, as the town grows and continues to attract larger scale non-residential developments, such as Woodbine 1 and the Health Project, as previously mentioned, we're seeing larger applications and larger sanitary allocation requirements. With delays to the Upper York sewage solution, there is a gap in our ability to provide servicing to non-residential development. As noted on the slide, moving forward, capacity for non-residential development is very limited, and a more robust interim measure would significantly improve the ability to bridge the gap to the UISS, which, as mentioned, is now anticipated by 2029 at the earliest. I'll now pass it back to Mr. Molinari to review potential options in more detail.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So next slide, please. Yeah, so what else can be done? So given the delays to the UISS, staff, the region, and the development community have been looking for innovative ways to expand our servicing capacity. One of the opportunities that the development community is proposing is a private on-site wastewater treatment plant similar to the one shown in the picture. Council will recall a detailed and innovative presentation by Redwood Properties with respect to their high-rise development at the corner of Yonge and Green Lane. This development proposed to use a similar wastewater treatment plant to the one shown in this picture to fully treat their wastewater without the need for the UISS. Another opportunity that's nearing implementation is infrastructuring for inline storage for the Sharon trunk sewer. That type of approach could also be potentially used in other locations in the town. So, where we have other sewers that feed into the YDSS, there may be opportunities to also add some additional inline storage capabilities and stretch our infrastructure a little bit more in other areas of the town as well. Finally, by improving building standards, such as requiring tight pipes that minimize infiltration of groundwater in the sewers and requiring other environmental features such as low flow fixtures and toilets, water consumption is reduced, and thus the load on the sanitary system downstream is also reduced. These measures allow us to optimize our existing sanitary system and minimize flows, which in turn allows more opportunities to stretch our infrastructure and capacity to accommodate more development, town facilities, and connections to the system. Next slide, please. Based on the same technology that was proposed by Redwood Developments for their high-rise at Yonge and Green Lane, there's a potential opportunity to replace the lagoons with a prefabricated sewage plant known as a membrane bioreactor facility, or MBR. These plants are scalable, and thus the plant capacity could be set to match that of the lagoons, or even add additional capacity to accept additional flows to help bridge the gap until the UISS is in place. From a technology perspective, the plant manufacturers confirmed that replacing the lagoons with a tailored prefabricated plant is technically feasible, requires a very short construction assembly timeline, is cost effective, and can provide drinking water quality effluent, which is a significant improvement over the lagoon effluent with the additional benefits of eliminating orders. The real challenge with this innovative proposal is the necessary approvals and the ties to the UISS environmental assessment, which is on the minister's desk. This proposal, or something like it, would require significant support at the town, the region, and the province, including from the Ministry of the Environment, the development community, and also stakeholders. So this, combined with political support and with a positive recommendation from the provincially appointed expert panel reviewing the UISS-EA, the Minister of the Environment could potentially allow the environmental compliance approval from the lagoons to be transferred to the plant, and subject to the UISS-EA being approved, provide sufficient additional capacity in the plant to bridge the gap to the UISS implementation. This would be an ideal scenario, but we recognize that a number of stars would have to align in order for this to happen. There may be other alternatives also available, but we offer this as a good and viable option worthy of being considered. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is a picture of the Holland Landing lagoons as they exist today. The picture in the middle is an operating facility in St. Thomas using a prefabricated MBR treatment plant. That plant was sized to accommodate approximately 1,500 persons, uses about 7 containers, and was assembled within a week once the foundation was constructed. A suitably sized plant to replace the lagoons would need to accommodate approximately 4,400 persons, and the manufacturer is advised that the plant would require about 14 containers, or about double the size of the picture in the middle. The photos on the right show the treatment facility on the inside of the containers. These are all prepackaged plants that have all of the necessary infrastructure built in, and they really go together kind of like Lego. They just, they're dropped on site, and basically bolted together and connected with all their process piping, and add power, and the system is ready to go. So a prefabricated plant to replace the lagoons would have an order of magnitude cost estimate of approximately $10 million, and with approvals in place could be set up and running within a matter of months. Expansion of the plant to bridge the gap to the UISS would be in addition to this, depending on how much additional capacity was desired. And that's the innovative solution that we were proposing tonight. So I'll pass it over to Mark Valchich, our Deputy CEO, to provide an overview of the town's environmental initiatives.
Thanks very much, Mike. Next slide, please. So it's really important on this slide. If you remember at the beginning of the presentation this evening, our CAO, Mr. Webster, talked about the strategic plan. And one of the areas of focus in our strategic plan, being council-approved strategic plan, was responsible growth and environmental protection. I think it's really important to note that when it comes to environmental protection and initiatives and programs, they really happen throughout our organization in a variety of ways and in a variety of areas. Everything from how planning is conducted, the development of our parks and trails, and the preservation of our green space. Mr. Molinari talked about some really important ones as it relates to infrastructure and so on. So there's many areas that we see kind of environment as a priority in our planning and in our programming. The Sustainable Development Incentive Program is an interesting example, because what started as sort of an initiative to address an interim servicing constraint and problem has really evolved into developing a leading best practice in terms of how to use this infrastructure in the most efficient way. And so, although it started as in response to dealing with a short-term constraint, the region is now looking at that throughout the region as a best practice that was initially started with some of the work that we're doing here. We work very closely with other environmental focused organizations, notably the Conservation Authority and the region are both listed here. And some of the work that we do is done, in fact, in partnership with those organizations. Some of our low impact development standards and projects, and some of our new infrastructure like parking lots and so on uses some of the concepts around minimizing environmental impact. And it's also important to note that going back to the sort of early 2000s, the town was known as sort of a leader in developing thinking green standards, the Energy Star standards, for example, that were introduced as building standards in the community. So we've had this as a major area of focus for many years, and it will continue to be a major focus moving forward. Next slide, please. We've heard earlier in the presentation about the fact that we're going to grow in the 2051 timeframe potentially to 135,000 or so population and much more job creation and employment growth, and the numbers continue to grow from there up to potentially 150,000 range. And what's really incredible is because we've been able to do this in a very sort of long-term planned fashion. As you heard earlier, we remain over 80% green when that's done, with expansive trails, parks, and green space, which is really going to be, the envy of many other municipalities that have grown before us, and perhaps would have done it differently if they were starting with a blank piece of paper today. One of the things that we are doing as well when it comes to prioritizing environmental initiatives and programming is that Council did approve, as part of the 2022 budget, the recruitment of a contract position to act as an environmental coordinator to help work with all of the different departments to coordinate the various environmental activities that we have ongoing. Also to develop a better framework for cataloging and reporting on that, because I think we can do a better job in comprehensively reporting on what we're doing in terms of environment and climate change initiatives, as well as to bring some new ideas to the town that we can also consider and incorporate. And the other thing I wanted to point out before I leave the topic of focus on environment is we have a very active and engaged environmental advisory committee, and that committee not only brings ideas and suggestions forward, but has been active in promoting community-based initiatives such as the No Mow May initiative and some of the others that we've had that have made a difference in East Gwillimbury when it comes to environment. Next slide, please. So in summary, and then I'm going to turn it over back to the CAO for closing comments. Really, I think the storyline that you've heard as this presentation this evening over the last hour or so is that EG is growing. It's going to continue to grow. We are a targeted area for growth provincially and regionally. We want to see that growth be balanced. We want to see residential and job creation, and there is notable demand for both. We're starting to see, we've got our largest employment proposal in the history of the town now being undertaken along the 404 corridor. So we've got incredible demand in East Gwillimbury. And I think the master plans and servicing strategies are being coordinated in a fashion and planned in a fashion that they're sound. They're going to position us well. I think the team that's been developed and that we continue to build on is solid and is well prepared to help us continue to manage that growth. And as Mr. Molinari indicated and Mr. Cook indicated earlier, a critical sort of piece of supporting expansion of growth in East Gwillimbury is going to be dealing with the servicing question. That really is probably the largest question that we have to deal with. And so some of the innovative practices that you heard this evening from Mr. Molinari are potentially going to be part of the solution in the interim to help us not only bridge the gap through to an ultimate expanded servicing solution, but also bring some much needed environmental benefits as well if we're able to do that. But those are going to need both provincial and regional support. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our CAO, Tom Webster, for sort of closing comments and talk to us a little bit about some of the recommendations that I think are being proposed for council consideration.
Well, that was quite a presentation and multifaceted for sure. I always try to simplify these things a little bit, and we've grown tremendously since 2016, particularly on the residential side. Our 7,000 units of original capacity is now, if you go to the numbers, we have about 3,000 units left, and when you're looking at a deliverable of 7 to 10 years optimistically for a large sewage solution, that leaves us in a tough spot right now. On the non-residential side, we're fortunate that we've got the 404 employment lands finally serviced. We've got a major employment proposal that'll increase our employment in its own accord by about 15%, that one development. But we're at one of the most unique positions, and I've been part of the York Region Confederation for 30 years now. Never as a municipality had to deal with the infrastructure constraints that we have to, and the province designating us as a major employment center and growth center for residential, and at the same time not getting the necessary approvals needed. And it's an interesting time. We look forward to the council discussion. And one of the most innovative things, and I commend Mike Molinari's group for this, is reviewing some of the private proposals and this whole initiative where we may be able to finally get the lagoons decommissioned with a state-of-the-art plant that is a lot more environmentally friendly, folks, than the lagoon system spewing into the Holland River system. And also providing us for some very much needed non-residential growth as we move forward, and to help bridge this gap we have of 7 to 10 years now of waiting for a major infrastructure solution. So there's been a lot of new material here tonight. I think there could be a lot more discussion, but maybe before we propose next steps in discussion, Madam Mayor, I'll put it back to you and let council offer their opinions, comments, and questions of this multifaceted presentation.
Thank you very much to staff. Certainly some sobering thoughts throughout the presentation tonight about East Gwillimbury and the dreams and hopes that we've had for a number of years. I really want to thank staff for the presentation. It was excellent, and I know that we all learned a little more about some systems that might work and how we go about maybe making it happen. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any council members that have questions or comments at this time. Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, I'd like to echo your thoughts on thanking staff for that presentation. And although we went over a lot of important information about a number of things tonight, you may not be surprised to think that I want to jump right back to the interim sewage solution and the decommissioning of the lagoons. I'm sure that I may be taking some of Councillor Carruthers' thunder too on this one, but it seems that we always talk about servicing and it's always about new development. I think this one needs to be front and center on what we're doing to look after some of our longtime residents that have been, I guess, putting up with, for lack of a better term, the lagoons. So I, for one, think that our resolution here tonight of receiving this presentation, I think we may want to put a little more teeth into it. I think we need to show that we certainly support at least the next step in finding out how well this solution would work, if it will work, some really good information that would come back. And I mean, I'm talking about everything. Is this something that could be put on the current site and use the infrastructure that's already there, which I think it may well be. I, for one, would love to go and tour one of these facilities and have a look. But I think our resolution needs to be worked a little bit tonight to push the region, if you will, to say that we are strongly behind anything that will get the lagoons decommissioned as soon as possible. And I look forward to my colleagues and yourself, Madam Mayor, who may have some strong thoughts on this also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know that tonight is just a workshop and we're here to just receive information and learn from this. And I too echo Councillor Foster's, I think, direction in that, you know, we'd like to see some staff reports and some proposed resolutions brought to us so that we can bring some greater awareness to the situation that we're in. As Mr. Webster said, you know, we're in a very tremendously unusual circumstance, and I can't help but feel like we're being used as a bit of a punching bag here, where we're told we have to grow, but we're not being given the tools to do so. And so that you know, instinctively, that's my first reaction, is I want to strike back, because I'm feeling like I'm not in a position to be able to advocate on behalf of our existing residents who need investments in infrastructure like those who are dealing with the lagoons, but then also for our future residents and those employers who they're lined up. Apparently, we have more than 10 applications lined up waiting for us, and we're unable to serve those people who want to invest in our community. My question, Madam Mayor, through you to staff, was wanting to have a bit more information or a greater understanding of how non-residential allocation is provided. When I look at the numbers, we've got 1,064 unallocated units. Those are residential units. When York Region gave us the numbers, population numbers, their report from June of 2018 gave us additional allocation for 2,727 residents. But nowhere do I ever have an understanding of how those non-residential flows are being calculated. In the past, when I was a new councillor, I asked that question and I was told there's always room in the pipe for employment uses. And that's not what we're hearing today. And so I'd like a better understanding of how that's calculated, because quite frankly, if it is restricted, then I want to take that 1,000 units and put it towards non-residential allocation, if that's how it's done. I don't know how it's done, and I'd like to have a better understanding of that, please, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Webster, do you have an answer to that question?
I will try, and I don't have an engineer's ring on. That might be helpful at this point, yes, to be honest with you. The councillor is quite correct. When we first started growing, we had the ability to reach 50,000 persons, which is the 7,000 units with about 3 folks in each home, and we were at about 25,000. So when you do the math, that's sort of how you get to 50,000. We were at very little growth, and we always had the notion that we were going to be able to go to, for each 2 residents, 1 job. And there was no constraints at all. The councillor is quite correct with that. We've always known that we had a limitation on the residential side. Just recently, the region, we've been dealing with them, and they've now started, and this is with spreadsheets and Excel programs and forecasts out, that are starting to look at, we have a very constrained non-residential site as well. And I think council is correct. I think one of the recommendations that I would make as administrator is to hold on those 1,000 units until we get some confirmation on what's happening on the non-residential side. And again, in our discussions with the expert panel, or the panel appointed by the province with the York Region Sewage Act, the first time we met with them, we talked about the constraints and the difficulty in managing a high growth municipality. We would like to get a council endorsement for this innovative sewage technology that would allow for decommissioning of the lagoons and some additional capacity in the inter. Any large municipal sewage infrastructure solution is going to take 7 to 10 years, and it'll leave us with a very tenuous situation where we just hit a full stop on any kind of growth. And we want to be able to to indicate to the province that they designated us as the growth area. They're largely responsible for the delay in approval. It's been sitting on a minister's desk for several governments there. And we would like to be able to bring this forward to find the necessary capacity. And we think our council could actually champion this solution forward. And that's where we are right now. So I would suggest there will be further reports coming on this for sure, Councillor Roy DiClemente. And the 1,000 units should be kept very closely at hand at this point in time.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just further to that, for me, it comes down to the fact that, there was some reference tonight even about the servicing of the Health and Active Living Plaza and having our serviced employment lands. It's one thing for us to be able to have a proponent who is running a pipe to those lands. For example, our Health and Active Living Plaza lands are serviced. The pipe is there. But is there a flow that allows for the toilets in that help to be flushing? I'm not hearing that, and I'm concerned that even our own infrastructure projects may be delayed. For me, the proposed solutions with some innovative ideas would result, I think, in, instead of having the locking of the brakes, if you're thinking about driving a car, would lock the brakes, your whole vehicle goes into a tailspin. But if you've got ABS and you've got smaller projects that allow you to progressively slow down your growth, but still move forward, I think that's the important takeaway from here today. But I definitely want to hear more about how these are calculated, because there's no information here for me. So if you're telling me it's restricted, explain it to me. And I'm not hearing that. And I know it's not our staff; it's their partners at other levels of government. But they've got some splaining to do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have, before I get to my question, though, through you to staff, but I will throw my comments on top of what Councillor Foster and I'm sure Councillor Carruthers will talk about with regards to the sewage lagoons in Holland Landing. I think anything we can do to improve that situation would be welcomed by the good people of Holland Landing, and we need to do everything we can to be innovative and try and figure our way out of that. And as well, on top of what Councillor Roy DiClemente was talking about, our growth and not having the tools to get to our growth objectives to the province, we may soon bear the distinction of being the fastest growing municipality in Canada to go to the slowest growing municipality in Canada if we don't get a resolution to this. So I certainly hope we can figure a way around that. But my question is to staff, and by the way, staff, this was an exceptional report. I know this didn't happen overnight. A lot of work went into it. So thank you very much for that. But my question is, and it goes back to slide, I believe it was slide 10, where we were talking about housing attainability, because I think that is such a critical issue right now, where you look at the average sale price of a home in East Gwillimbury. Last time I looked, is $1.3 million. About 2 years ago, it was $800,000. It's an insane increase in housing pricing. So, I'd like to know, and I ask this to staff, what sort of, we talk about policy tools at our disposal, what sort of tools do we have at our disposal where we can influence or encourage developers to offer some attainable housing prices? If the average price tag is $1.3 million, that's not very attainable for new couples and people starting out in their life. And if we're looking at about having people to fill the jobs that we're creating here in East Gwillimbury, a $1.3 million home is not very affordable if you're making just slightly above minimum wage. So we need to get a grip on what we can do for around housing attainability. So I'd be very curious to hear what sort of levers do we have as a council and as a town to encourage that attainable housing mix and the diversity of housing that we want to create here. And I know we've gone a long way. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my question.
Councillor Morton, go ahead, please.
Madam Mayor, did you want us to speak to that, or was it just a comment that you wanted to follow up?
I'm making notes, but if you can answer that one, I can scratch that off my list.
There's no perfect answers tonight, Madam Mayor. I will tell you that because these are very good questions. But one thing I can assure you is just from observations in Northern York region. So there's a development that just released stacked townhomes with no property across from Magna, and the price there is 1.3 million. So that's not just the average price. That's starting to become a low-end entry price, which is quite frankly unattainable. And having children trying to enter the housing market, you can really feel it's unattainable in York region. I would point to a couple of things. Madam Mayor, you sit on the York Region's Affordable Housing Task Force, and I know that they're working very vigilantly at trying to come up with solutions at the regional level. To my mind, it's almost a little like the Upper York thing. I think that this is something that needs federal, provincial, and municipal consistent action. We sit here in these COVID times with a lot of foreign investment into the real estate market. A lot of it is absent or vacant homes where they're just buying it for speculative purposes. We're at historic long time interest rate lows. It's been the perfect storm for this increase where we've seen home prices increase by 50% in the last 2 years. And I think that's like across Ontario, across Canada. And my personal perspective, Councillor, is that there may be some correction coming to the market, but I think it's going to involve much more from certain ends, supply and action by all three levels of government. So I would say let's stay very attuned to what's going on with the regional initiative. But any municipal levers that we could pull, I think, are something that we would have to be cognizant of moving forward once we get to some of these solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I'm going to have Councillor Morton, then Councillor Persichini, and then Councillor Crothers.
Whoops, hit the wrong one. No, good. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that I remembered when I first got on council, that there was talk about doing, and whether we need them or not more, I don't know, but someone mentioned to me the other day about trails that could go through all of the, from Mount Albert right over to Sharon again, through the bushes and the green part. And I'm wondering if that might be something that we should be looking at, or at least keeping it in our heads, so that maybe it's something that we can get. I mean, the bikes and that are out on the roads, but there could be walking trails inside where those bikes would stay off the roads.
Thank you. Councillor Persichini, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fully agree with Mr. Webster, what he's talking about. I only want to go a little further. What could we do as a municipality, since we're supposed to be, as they said, the fastest growth in Canada, to move forward to get the infrastructure, the sewers? What can we do? We sit here, we have this great workshop, which I want to thank the staff for doing a great job. It was really a lot of information there. But what can we do? Where can we start? Now the election's coming. Is it the right time to all of us in the region, as a municipality, get after the provincial people, or whoever that approves, the sewers? What can we do? We just talk about it and do a lot of wasted time on our air time, and just talk about it and get frustrated. Maybe Mr. Webster can tell us, because where do we start? What can we do to get those sewers earlier? Because otherwise, this is a roadblock down the road. We only got so many units left. We're gonna start doing stack houses like Newmarket over there on Yonge Street there. And it's still very expensive, as you were saying, on Magnum area. We need to do something. We need to find a way that we have power to have them listen to us. I don't know. I'm frustrated. We could talk all night here, but if we don't have those sewers, we don't have much to go by now. Thanks.
Mr. Webster, could you answer Councillor Persicini's question or not?
I think it's complex, and I think the comments are noted. I think they're from the heart, and we do have some revised recommendations. We've heard from members of council that just receipt wasn't maybe strong enough, and of course there could be more reports on this if council so chooses on certain aspects of it. But particularly with respect to the lagoons, and that we have Mr. Molinari's group has prepared a more enhanced resolution, Madam Mayor, for potential consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. What a great workshop this has been. There was just so much information there. I was so excited when I saw about this innovative solution to decommission the lagoons and perhaps give us some capacity for some employment lands, some wastewater capacity there. The one thing that was a little bit of a yellow flag to me when I heard decommissioning the lagoons or growth. And I just want to reiterate what Councillor Foster said, that we have to make sure that our existing residents who have been so patient through all this are looked after first, and that's decommissioning the lagoons first before bringing in some of this innovative stuff to have more houses going in. Let's make sure that that's clearly our priority, but it's a very exciting possibility, and I think it's certainly the way forward. I'm happy with any recommendations that we have to get staff working on this as soon as possible. As far as the attainable housing goes, I just finished a course through FCM, and it's all about land prices, really, right? And so in order to make it affordable or attainable, we need to go for density. And we're seeing density in some of the proposals that are coming forward, but then we're kind of taken aback by the lack of parking, because we know when we are a car-driven community, townhouses even need 2 parking spaces. So what we can do to help bring down prices is to build a community that's more walkable, so that when development come in, they don't need so many parking spaces, because those take up a lot of land and they drive up the cost of houses. So when things are more dense, there's less infrastructure, less miles of pipe, less miles of road, less miles of sidewalk. So we have to be looking at density if we're looking for affordability. There's not a whole lot that we can do. We can't just, punt it up to upper levels of government. So I'm hoping that as we're planning, that we're really looking at that, because that's something that we do have some control over. I have just one question, and I've already talked to Mr. Webster about this offline, but I'm going to put you on the spot on camera. When do we expect to hear about that environmental lead being put in place? What sort of timeline are we expecting on that?
I'll let Deputy Valchich speak to that, because we talked about it this morning.
Excellent.
Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Crothers, and thank you for asking. I actually meant to mention that during the presentation, so thank you for raising the question. We, in fact, have had a lot of interest in the position, and our interviews for that position actually start tomorrow. So we'll be interviewing through the balance of this week. We've got some great candidates, and we're hopeful that if the interview processes validate what we think we see on the resumes and the expressions of interest, that very shortly we're hopefully going to be landing that, and then quickly thereafter introducing somebody new to our senior team and to council. So that process is well underway, and we're looking forward to getting that completed soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I didn't hear it in your presentation. I wasn't sure if I missed it, so thank you very much. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, staff. As we heard a little earlier, there have been a lot of moving pieces with the Upper York and a number of other projects that we thought were going to take place, and they haven't. I listened to a webinar last week, and I learned, I'll throw it out there, I can't confirm it, but the information that I received, that in East Gwillimbury and surrounding areas, an acre of land is worth now $1 million. And so we talk about affordable housing. How on earth do you ever get affordable housing when the land itself is $1 million an acre? We are trying to take a look at some other solutions here. I can tell you in listening to members of council about the innovative idea that is in St. Thomas. I did take the trip to St. Thomas with a couple of staff members, and it is an amazing project. Go back and have a look at those pictures. It is small, it is not intrusive to the community, and it's working. We have no idea when the Upper York sewage solution is going to be realized. We have no idea. We have no idea where other situations are going to lead us as well, with projects that are large, but no answers. I think that what we probably should be doing is making sure that those that are in the queue are completed. The worst thing we could ever have in East Gwillimbury is half-finished subdivisions. And it's wonderful to have people out there investing in our community, but the end result is that if they can't complete it, it's not good for them, and it's not good for us as well. I talked to several staff this afternoon preparing for tonight, and I was assisted in putting some thoughts to paper on perhaps some steps that we should be moving forward and taking advantage of. The first one, and they're in no particular order, is that council support the Redwood Goldstein proposal. That's the private sewage and servicing solution in principle. I think that's really important. I've seen it. The one that Redwood is proposing is much larger than what I saw, but the company that put the one in St. Thomas has many more around, and they're working quite well. I think that we should endorse the concept of an interim treatment plant or measures which would eliminate the lagoons and provide additional capacity, perhaps if there was anything left over. The lagoons have been in East Gwillimbury as long as I've lived here. That's 45 years. And 45 years, every spring, we all know that it is very problematic for everybody that owns it and anybody that drives by it. And as I have said many, many times, it's unacceptable in this day and age to have open sewage lagoons in our community. So I would think that perhaps we should recommend, as I said, something that will eliminate the lagoons and provide maybe some additional small amount, as it may be, capacity. Also, I think we should recommend to the province that the approval of the environmental assessment for Upper York sewage solution be expedited. I mean, how long do we wait for this? It was supposed to be pretty much done and ready to go, and we haven't had any comments back whatsoever about what stage it's at. Is there a problem? Is it held up for one reason or another? The silence is deafening. I think we also should recommend to the province that an interim solution to bridge the gap to the upper sewage solution should be approved. I'm not sure what that is, but I think it's important that the province realizes that we've had quite an evening tonight, quite an evening that has taken many years to get to where we are, as far as good things that have happened in East Gwillimbury and some things that have not, and those that have not been have not been the problem of our town. It's been the problem of somebody outside of the town. So with that, perhaps a recommendation to the province that an interim solution to bridge the gap to the Upper York sewage solution be approved. And the last one is recommend to the province that lagoons be replaced with an innovative treatment plant, such as a prefabricated membrane bioreactor facility to eliminate odors and improve effluent quality into Lake Simcoe and the Upper York sewage solution in place. So I ran through those very quickly. I'm not sure if we can put them up or not. But I think, and as you look at the requests that I have put in place, it's not to the region, it's to the province. The buck stops at the province. And I think we start there. And quite frankly, it's just not good enough anymore in East Gwillimbury. I've had enough. I think everybody else on council has had enough, and I can tell you our residents have had enough. We need some action, and I think this is a good start with your approvals. So comments and questions. Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any profound issues with these resolutions, other than the fact that this was supposed to be an education workshop, and that from a procedural perspective, we shouldn't really be in a position to be pushing these forwards. Absolutely, we need to be sounding the alarm, Madam Mayor, as you say, and it's urgent. And so from that perspective, I would like to direct staff that they bring us a report that outlines these or highlights some of these issues, and with some proposed resolutions for us to consider to our next meeting. I would like to suggest we talk specifically about one particular application and a proponent. I might suggest that instead of calling out that particular application, that we simply identify that servicing opportunity or that servicing technology as one that we would support in principle. So that might also encourage other private investors who might also want to bring forward a solution similar to that. So, but my only issue would be that we haven't had a staff report about that technology, how it works, and whether that would be something that we would want to be supporting. Obviously, our staff are the expert on this technology, and I think we're still stumbling over the words on, you know, how it's all dealt with. And I just make jokes about things floating and going downstream, but frankly, you know, I'd like to have a report from staff that outlines this so that I can better understand it and support it, and that we can all pass a resolution that literally sounds the alarm, because that's the problem we have right now. Thank you.
I might suggest that St. Thomas is 2.5 hours away, that seeing is believing. And perhaps when we get to that point, there's an opportunity to take a little road trip. Other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. Mr. Webster, go ahead, please.
Madam Mayor, this is quite a change from a receipt of a workshop recommendation, and the ordering is interesting to my mind too, putting the private proposal, which wasn't really discussed here too much. The technology was. I'm wondering, Madam Mayor, we've waited 8 years for a sewage approval, and we could maybe wait 7 more days, that we could bring back a perfected resolution. And I would even ask for Mr. Molinari's group. I don't know if it necessarily needs a report after this 50 odd page growth management workshop presentation, but maybe we could ask Mr. Molinari's area to put together a presentation on the technology so council can have a better understanding. We all don't have the time to drive the 2.5 hours down to St. Thomas, but those that have understand it and might be able to put together a bit of a understanding so council better understands the technology. And really what it is, it's A, B, C, and D. And the D would cover off the private proposal as well. And maybe we, if council agrees, Madam Mayor, we could bring that forward to our meeting on the evening session, April 20th. I think that might gives everyone a chance to digest this material from tonight. I think there's a willingness for council to support these initiatives. I just want to make sure we get it right and bring the resolution back, have it out to council beforehand, and have a presentation, a small presentation regarding the St. Thomas technology and proposal and what the benefits are than the open lagoon system.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
I think in this day and age, when we're doing so much virtually, hopefully we can get some sort of virtual tour of St. Thomas rather than burning all that fossil fuel to take us all out there. I think most people on council are pretty much on board with the technology. We don't need to understand it like an engineer, but I would love to see some sort of video presentation. I don't think it's worth the drive to St. Thomas to see it, but I'm fully on board for that.
No offense to St. Thomas.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
It would be on a lot smaller scale, but I understand there is one in Whitchurch Stouffville. Is that an option to have a look? Again, I know it's small, but it might answer some of the questions we're looking for.
I've been to the one in Stouffville. It's in Ballantrae. I was there actually when it was put in as a school board trustee. That's how far back, and it's still working well. I think it's still working well. I haven't heard differently, and it's up and running. So I think there's opportunities. The people that have put together the one in St. Thomas perhaps have a video. Perhaps could come and speak to us with their technical information. It's exactly what we need, and I would hate to not have everyone see it and understand it. So, with that, are there any other comments or questions from members of council? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Webster, any comments?
Actually, I do have one. I don't want to set staff into a little bit of a frenzy. The agenda deadline's tomorrow, Madam Mayor, for the 20th. So if we reserve, we'll do the best we can to bring this back on the 20th. But I think it's one we want to get right. We want to have the proper information. And take a look. Even Councillor Foster's correct. The Ballantrae community was originally designed for 900 homes on a private system, and it worked so well. I think Mayor Hackson got involved because the school board ended up hooking into that system for the school site. And so we'll compare the technologies there. They do work. But I would like to reserve, Madam Mayor, that we either report back on the 20th or alternatively, the first meeting in May, which would be May 3rd, that we will bring the resolution back with some additional information on these innovative sewage options. So that would give Mr. Molinari's group a little more time to make sure we get it right.
I'm quite comfortable with that, and I'm seeing some nods here that we've waited a long time for this, and let's get it right. The 3rd of May should be fine, I hope, for staff by putting it off that little bit longer. And I'm wondering if there are any points that we have that we've talked about already that we do want to move forward tonight, or leave everything until such time as we're back in council chambers with staff on May 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Leave it that way.
I'm not seeing any problems with this. So, but I think it's a package. So
I think you're right, Madam Mayor. I think it's a package, and we put it in one big box. It's got more oomph if you bring it with a big box instead of a bunch of little ones.
And a bowl.
Just thinking of Amazon.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, then let me just. I'm wondering how, Mr. Clerk, we would handle the 3 or 4 items that I had listed earlier. Will we just, how would you suggest that we handle those at this time?
Madam Mayor, I think that all that's required for tonight would be to receive the presentation, and it sounds like all of the other items will be sort of wrapped together in the report back from staff, as I understand it.
Thank you very much. So could I have a mover or seconder to receive? Councillor Crone, Councillor Morton, all those in favor? And that's carried. And a confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Roy DiClemente, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That's carried. And we will adjourn our meeting at 7:40 p.m., moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, for all your work. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.